He reached in his pocket one day and pulled out this bullet and showed this to us, and he pointed to the back of the seat, and he said that he was in a train and it was strafed, and that bullet just went through the sleeve of his uniform and went in the back of the seat, and they missed him just that far. And another time, when the train stopped, was because of they were in a marshalling yard, and then waiting to get on the track again, get lined up for another track, and then come air raid sirens. And boy, I want to tell you what, they got us off of that train, all three of them, and everybody was running across the tracks in this marshalling yard out to the edge of the town and out in the edge of the countryside, and it was kind of rolling like that, and went over one hill and down the other. We got down behind one little hill, and wasn't very high hill, but we got down behind it and all just lay down flat. They lay down, we lay down beside them, and we looked and never did bomb that marshalling yard then.
So why?
Because we found out later that they were given orders to deliver us to a prison camp, and that when they did that, the war was over for them. They could go home, and by golly, they were going to deliver us to that prison camp no matter what. And by this time, we had become friendly with them. It wasn't like they were nasty or nothing. We were just friends, you know. And when we went back to get on the train after that, getting off for that bomb raid, why we got back near the train, and a German youth boy stopped us. And boy, he was furious, and he whipped out his little German youth dagger, and man, he was foaming at the mouth. He was so mad, and he was going to cut our throats. He was going to kill us. And the guard with the submachine gun just pulled it down off his shoulder and put it right at him and said, "If you don't back off and go away, I'm going to blow you in half." Now, this was all in German, but I know that's what he said, because the guy looked real funny, put the knife in his sheath and took off. And there again, why, this was because they knew that when they delivered us, they could go home. And then another afternoon, why, there was another air raid warning, and a P-51 was chasing a German spotter plane. It was like a little, it was not a Cessna, but it was like a little Cessna, and this little Cessna was flying all around the trees and right close to the ground and hiding behind the trees, and the P-51 couldn't get a shot at him. Chasing him all over the place. Then another, that was one morning, then another afternoon while the train stopped for another air raid warning, and this time we got off, and boy, I mean, by the time we got off the train, we looked in a few cars down with these flat cars, and all of a sudden, man, I mean, the coverings flipped off of those flat cars, and there was about 3 of them there with anti-aircraft guns on them, 40mm Bofors and bigger, and man, I mean, you talk about snappy. Those German gunners were really sharp, man. I mean, they were on those guns, and it was there again, it was some P-51s flying real high. They never fired, but I thought, boy, it would be really bad luck if it would have been like this on the train I strafed. Because, I mean, strafing that train, you'd been in trouble.
I suppose.
Real trouble.
God.
But anyway, the air raid was over, and we got back on the train, and the train went on. And I'm sure they covered the guns back up with, you couldn't tell there was guns on the flat cars because they were all covered over with this canvas. It was kind of a dark olive green, real dark. We got into Munich, and it was before daylight, and the guards told us, now, when we get off the train, we got to be careful, because the American bombers have really torn this town up. And the civilians and soldiers are really, really, really on edge. And so what we want to do is we want you to march along. There won't be anybody much around, but we want you to march 2 by 2 on the sidewalk, and we'll march right along beside you, one in front, one in back, one on the side, and we march along, and you're our prisoners, and we want you to look like it, because if you don't, one of these crazy people will have to kill us all, you and us. And they were serious, and we understood, and so we did. We marched right along 2 by 2, and we went on. It was in the middle of town. We went on all the way through town and out the edge of town. Why, it was just getting gray daylight, and there was a little German restaurant out at the edge of town, all by itself in a single building. And there was signs on the window, and they knew it was a restaurant. They went and knocked on the door, and it wasn't open, of course. Finally, while the little owner come to the door, and they asked him, did he have any food, that we hadn't had anything to eat. And they hadn't either, but now they'd eaten up their lunch and their food that their mothers had backed for them. And the German owner of the little restaurant said he didn't have anything. And so one of our guys told our guards, ask him if he'll give us a cup of hot water. And so they asked him, and he graciously said yes, and opened the door and invited us in. And it was real clean. We sat down at the table, and he brought a cup of hot water. And one of them, somebody had a bouillon cube. And he gave us a spoon too, and he put the bouillon cube in that cup of hot water and stirred it up and made bouillon and passed it all around, and all 8 of us took just a tiny sip of it, and hey, we hadn't had anything to eat for several days. So we left the restaurant and walked on down the road, and it was a 2-lane blacktop road, and it was out in the country now. And no more buildings, houses near the road or anything. And one area, pretty soon there was woods on either side of the road, but from the pavement over to the edge of the woods is like as it is here, it was grass, and it had been mowed, and it was kind of down in a little ditch and then back up. It wasn't much of a ditch, it was just a low spot. And we were walking along, and we looked over there, and there was something laying over there at the side. And we got up to it, and we stopped, and we looked, and there was a man laying there, and he had on kind of like flannel pajamas or something, pants and shirt, you know. He was laying face up, a hole right between his eyes, right there. And we looked at him, we looked at the guards and said, what happened to him? Well, why is he there? And they shrugged and said, he was probably a Russian prisoner that the Army uses to fill bomb holes with in the streets and runways and like that. And he caused some problem, and they shot him. They just left him laying there. We walked on a little further, and the woods ended on that side, on the side he was on. And there was open pasture like fields and real rolling land like that. And down there, gosh, 200, 300 yards, there was something going on. We stopped and looked, and they were setting up a field kitchen. The German Army was had set up a big field kitchen, and they had these big metal pots, that big around, and oh, that tall, and they were sitting on a iron stand, so they had fire built under them, wood, and they were cooking. And there was a couple of Army trucks there, and there was these same guys in these same clothes that was the guy laying on the side of the road, in the same color and everything. They were all just lining up to get their food. And they had these metal mess kits like we had, similar, with the knife and fork that went on the handle, you know? Mm-hmm. No? And they were there in line, and all of a sudden, one of them evidently had tried to get ahead of somebody else in line, and they started to fight, and they were banging each other with their mess kits. And this sergeant, German sergeant, we could see his stripes even that far away. He yelled something in German, and boy, about 3 or 4 German guards come running out from behind one of those trucks, and they lined up parallel to those guys in line. Their backs were to us, and they didn't know we were on the road. They were too far away, and they didn't see us. But I want to tell you what, when the machine guns stopped firing, there wasn't a guy standing in that line. Man, I mean, they mowed everybody in that line down. We lost our appetite in a hurry. We looked at our guards and said, let's go down the road.
How many people were in line?
It was somewhere near 100.
Holy cow.
Man, I mean, well, if they didn't kill them, they were badly wounded. I mean, they were all laying on the ground. They didn't, man, it was about 4 machine guns, and they just wouldn't stop firing. Man, they just mowed that whole line down. I don't know who they fed the food to that day, but anyway, they didn't care about that. But we lost our appetite. We went on down the road. About a mile or 2 further on, we come another one of those pastures like that and rolling the hill. And boy, we stopped and we were looking, and down on the far side, about a couple of 100 yards away, we saw these huge animals that looked like deer. And it turned out to be, they were these big German stags. They were big as an elk or bigger, you know, had great big horns. And we stopped the guards and we said, you know, we sure are hungry. And what we'd like for you to do is let us have the machine gun. And we'll, several of them had, guys, well, I had 2, had hunted a lot. And we know how to hunt. And we'll go over and we'll slip down those woods and kill one of those animals, and we'll skin him out, and the guards had knives, and we'll skin him out, and we'll have something to eat. Somebody had some matches, and we'll build a little fire and cook something. Boy, the guards were aghast. They said, no, it's verboten. And we said, why? It's verboten. And they explained to us in German and English that all of those and all other animals like that belonged to Hitler, and it was a death sentence to kill one. And they wouldn't even think about it. They didn't care whether they or we had anything to eat or not. We walked on down the road, and about, I don't know, 4 or 5 miles further, we decided that we wanted to take a little break. So we got them to, let's stop. So we walked off the road and walked up on a little hill and sat down, and there was pasture grass and a lot of clover in it. And we were looking for a 4-leaf clover, of course. And I don't know, somebody found one. But while we were sitting there, and we weren't making much noise, why, a little spotted deer walked right up to us. Within, you could almost touch it. And of course the guards, verboten, no. And so we had to let that go too. We got back on the road and we started walking on. We were going to prison camp. We were walking from Munich to Stalag 7A, this prison camp that I told you that I'd looked down at and thought it was a German barracks, you know, military installation. Now, I didn't know that's where we were going, but after I got inside it, I realized that's where we were going. And went on down the road further, and a few miles further on, behind us, we heard these engines, and pretty soon, a semi-truck passed us. And we asked the guards, it was an olive drab truck, but it didn't have any swastikas or any German insignia. What is those trucks and where they're going? And they told us that the trucks were from Switzerland. They knew the insignia on it, and they were hauling food from Switzerland. And we said, hey, there's more coming. Stop the next one, and let's see if we can get a ride. And so one of them got out in the road and waved his arms like that, and he just stood there right out in the road, and the truck coming on, but the truck stopped. and he talked to the driver. And of course, they could talk in German and understand each other. And the driver said, "Hey, open the back of the trailer up and get in." And he told the guard where he's going, and he was going to the prison camp where the guard was taking us. And so we rode the rest of the way to the prison camp. It was about another, I guess, 15 so miles.
How many
20
days
miles.
have you been traveling?
This all happened, believe it or not, in one day.
Really?
Early in the morning. And it was getting on in the afternoon then when we got on that truck. And we got to the prison camp, and the guards checked us in, and they gave us each a Red Cross package, and it was a cardboard box, about square, about like that, and gave each prisoner one. And the guards didn't get one. And so the guards were given instructions to take us on up the road to a German interrogation center because we had not been officially interrogated. And so that was there, and then to bring us back to that prison camp. And they could check us in. And so we sat down on the grass in front of the headquarters and opened up these boxes because we were hungry. And we ate some of the stuff out of the boxes, and there was everything in the box you could think of: chocolate Hershey bars, all kind of stuff to eat, you know, crackers and bread and Canadian bacon that's like ham, you know, and all kind of things. And so we shared it with the three guards, and of course, it was such rich food. Until it wasn't long before all of it come back up on the guards. They upchucked it all right there. And so anyway, we took the boxes and went on down the road toward the interrogation center, which was supposed to be 150 kilometers further toward the lines. And we walked on along, and it was starting to get, it was getting towards sundown, the sun getting real low just before going down. And we asked the guards, and there wasn't anything near the road at all, just fields. And well, where you think we can find a place to stay tonight? And they looked around, they looked off to the left, and way down there, 3/4 of a mile, maybe a mile away, well, they could see a farmhouse. And they said, well, there was a little trail leading down toward it. They said, we'll go down there and ask. And we went down to this farmhouse, and there was a little German farmer and his wife there, and nobody else. And they had a big barn, and they told us, yes, we could sleep in the barn and go up in the hayloft, and it would be okay up there. It'd be warmer. It was cold, because it's April. And then we asked them, could we wanted to cook some of this food that we had. Some of it needed cooking. And we asked them, would we use their kitchen? And they said yes. And so we went in, and they gave us eggs because they had chickens and they had plenty of eggs. And they gave us eggs. We scrambled up a bunch of eggs and cooked up some of that other stuff. And we had a heck of a supper. And then we went out to the barn, and I had on a T-shirt, undershirt, and I pulled that thing off and put it back down, tied it and put it back down over my head so my hair wouldn't get that hay all in it. We burrowed in that hay, and boy, we slept like it was foam mattresses. We got up the next morning and had more eggs for breakfast, and went out and got on the road and headed toward the place again. And on down the road. Well, after a while, we come to a place in the road where there was some big oak trees or some kind of trees with a lot of leaves on them and a shade, and there was no traffic on the road at all. And we decided that we'd stop and sit down and rest a little while. Well, right up near the road was a farmhouse under these oak trees, and there was a fence between the road in the farmhouse, and there was kind of a barn-like building. The farmhouse had these red barrel tiles. And when we sat down, I walked down, there wasn't any activity around at all. It was fairly early in the morning, but daylight. And I walked down the fence and I was looking, and I didn't know it, but this guy that pushed the button on the mic and fired his machine guns at the same time at the jet, he'd ask the guard that had the machine gun to let him see the machine gun. Well, prior to this, the night before, the afternoon before, after we left the headquarters of the prison camp and we were on the road, we were walking along and the guards were tired of carrying the machine gun, so one of our guys said, well, we'll carry it for you. So he gave it to him. And well, hey, they knew we weren't going to shoot them and they weren't going to shoot us, because we needed them and they needed us. And we were carrying the machine gun and kind of walking along all together and kind of laughing and joking, and all of a sudden coming back from the front were these single soldiers marching on the other side, coming back in the front, and boy, they had bandages around their arms and in slings and blood bleeding through and glassy-eyed, and they'd been shot up in the front lines and been sent back. And they were looking at us kind of like, well, what the heck, And about the second or third one that looked at us real crazy like, and boy, every one of them had a rifle. And we stopped the guards. We said, did you notice those soldiers coming back from the front, how they looked at us and that they were wounded and everything? And they said, yeah. They said, here, you take the machine gun back. See, we were carrying the machine gun. They didn't understand. We were carrying the machine gun. And you take this back, and we're going to line up 2 by 2, and we're going to do it like we did back in Munich. The one with the machine gun is going to march along the side of this column, and one in front and one in back. And we're going to march down this road as your prisoners, because the next one of those shot up guys that comes by, we don't want him to kill us all. And we did. We worked on until we went down to that farmhouse and stayed the night. And anyway, we were sitting on the road there under those oak trees, and this pilot asked to see the machine gun, and of course we'd been carrying it, so they handed it to him, And that sucker took the safety off, and I didn't know, but next thing I know, he'd pressed the trigger, and that thing had a cycle of so fast you couldn't even count it. It was just a stutter. But the tile were flying off of that red barrel tile, were flying off of that roof. Just hitting the ground and clatter, 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 and the sound of that submachine gun. And of course, he turned the trigger loose, but boy, he held it down a good bit to shoot a bunch of those tiles off. And the guy walked back over to him real quick and took the gun back from him. And about this time, boy, that house erupted. German soldiers putting on their long johns, getting into their pants, trying to get into a shirt or whatever. And one old sergeant already had his clothes on. He come boiling out to that fence just mad as 10 hornets. And of course, our oldest guard went down to the fence, and another one went with him, and we're standing there now with the other guard with us, and this guy asked him, what in the heck? And our guard told him that it was an accident, and that one of his men accidentally pulled the trigger on that gun, didn't intend to. And they talked a long time, and this guy finally calmed down. I thought, man, and all these guys come out there, we were back of him with guns and everything. I thought they were going to shoot all of us. He finally calmed down, and we hadn't shaved or anything for 2 weeks more, and in these Red Cross kits was shaving equipment. And we told them to ask them if we could use the latrine, and also could we shave. And he graciously said, yeah, it's in the building right there. It looked like a barn. We went in there, and there was one of these long trough-like latrines, but then there was also a little shelf and mirrors along the shelf where his guys went in there and shaved, and we shaved and washed up and our face and all, and combed our hair, and there was combs in these kits too, and felt a lot better. And so then we started on down the road again, and a little bit further along in the day, why we could hear the cannon fire on the front lines, and man, it was getting louder and louder. And of course, we were a few miles from it. I don't know how many miles, but we stopped the guards and talked to them. And we said, "You hear the cannon fire?" "Yes, we hear the cannon fire." "Well, we believe that the front lines have moved this side of the interrogation center, and we won't be able to get through those front lines without all getting shot or killed, because they won't know us, or your guys won't, or our guys won't, from whoever, and they'll kill us all. And we don't think we ought to go on up there." And they thought about it a while, and we talked some more, and finally they decided, "Okay, we'll take you back to the prison camp." And we turned around and headed back to the prison camp. And before we got to the prison camp, why, the two guards told us goodbye and gave us their German addresses. And I don't know what happened to mine. I lost it, but I never did get a chance to write to them. And the other one took us up to the camp and turned us in, and then he had his orders, written orders. He was free to go home too, and they all went home, and they left us there at the prison camp. And of course, then they run us through their regular procedure of taking one of our dog tags and giving us a German dog tag in place of it. Run us through the delousing system, but put this delousing powder all in your hair and down your shirt and everything else, and then finally took us to the American compound. And this was a big prison camp, because part of it was an American compound, there was a British compound, there was a Russian compound, there was a French compound, and they separated all of them by nationalities, these different compounds. I think there was Russians there too, I'm not sure. But anyway, we got more Red Cross boxes. And we learned how to, well, I already knew because Dad showed us how to do this when we were kids, to make little pots and pans out of the cans that beans or something come in. And we had a way there too to cut the cans and make a handle and cut the rest of it off, and you had a little pot. And we could cook a little bit with those can pots and over little fires. And the first night in that prison camp, there wasn't a bunk for me and several others, but there was one barracks where there wasn't any bunks, and we slept on the floor. And of course it was hardwood floor, but hey, laying down to sleep was laying down to sleep. We didn't care. And then we got a bunk, and each morning, why, we had a fall in for counts, you know. And they counted the prisoners and all fell in formation, and our officers, the senior officers, the highest ranking officer, of course, was a commander of the American part of the camp. And we were there for a few more days. They told us a story about, before we got there, that they didn't have anything to eat because there wasn't any Red Cross packages, and they were really hungry. And in one of the rooms, why, there was a guy that had been a butcher, and they seen this house cat come through the fence and go down the fence a ways and cross the yard and go back through the fence, and